So Jesus says that we wage war, but not as humans do. And, just getting up, it's so important when we wake up to realize that we're at war, that we're engaged in a real war, and that we're called by Jesus to wage war, but not as humans do. And that he says that, by his power and by his spirit, that we knock down strongholds of human reasoning where Satan gets a hold of us and gets control in our lives. And one of the ways that we need to knock down human reasoning is the way that we define being a coward. I've been checking on my kids throughout the night, and as I go into their rooms, they'll have their closet light on, or their LEDs, and they don't like the darkness. They don't like to sleep in the darkness. It's a natural thing, right? That when we're kids, we have like this fear of the dark, and it's crazy because what we start to do with that is we start to try, parents always try to make their kids feel comfortable in the darkness. But I was thinking about this the other night, and while I was praying, I was going, you know what? I don't want my kids to be comfortable in darkness. They shouldn't be comfortable in darkness. In fact, I believe that is something that's put in us by our Creator, by Jesus, who's the light of the world, that we shouldn't be comfortable in darkness. And so it's crazy, though, because when we think about people being fearful in any way or whatever, we think of them as being cowards, and we try and even teach our kids just, there's nothing to be afraid of when it comes to the darkness. And maybe in a physical sense, some of that is true, but that's not what Jesus says. In fact, we should be teaching our kids and even allowing Jesus to teach us that we shouldn't be comfortable in darkness, right? But that we should use it as an opportunity to pursue him and to teach them what it looks like to not have to be afraid because, we're close to Jesus and we're by his side, and to pursue intimacy with him and to pursue being close with the Good Shepherd, the one who created our soul, the one who sustains our soul, and the one who guards and protects our soul, the Good Shepherd, the shepherd of our souls. And that's exactly what Jesus says in John 10, that he's the Good Shepherd, right? And he starts to talk about Satan as the thief. And he says, that his purpose is to kill and steal, kill, and destroy, and that his purpose is to give life and life to the fullest, or to give a rich and satisfying life. And then he says, I'm the Good Shepherd. And so when Jesus talks about us not having to be afraid, and he constantly says to us, don't be afraid and don't fear, it's always because he's saying, you can be close to me. And when you're close to Jesus, you're attached to Jesus, and we're just like sheep attached to our shepherd, we don't have to fear because we're with him. And then he even says there in John 10, he says, my sheep recognize my voice, and they listen to me and they follow me. But they run from the stranger's voice. He's talking about Satan. And he's saying they run from his voice. And so you even see Jesus saying that we should run from his voice, and that voice should be strange to us, that we should realize that that's not his voice, and that's not the voice that we want to follow. We want to follow him. And so it's crazy because human reasoning says you're a coward if you have some fear of darkness, or you run, but there's nothing that makes you a coward to run from death and run to Jesus and run to life. It's the opposite of what the world says, and isn't it that way with everything in Jesus's kingdom? It's the opposite of the customs and the behaviors and the human reasoning that's been ingrained in us. And I just think it's really important that we let Jesus define what it means to be a true coward. And in Revelation 21, Jesus is talking about him sitting on the throne. It's this picture of him right now sitting on the throne, making all things new, and talking about the people who come to him and are thirsty for him and pursue him. They'll be victorious. They'll have every spiritual blessing, that he will be their God. He'll be our God, and we will be his children. And then in Revelation 21, verse 8, this is where Jesus defines what a true coward is. In fact, he starts by giving this list of people who will not inherit the kingdom, but he says their fate is the fiery lake of burning sulfur. And in Revelation 21:8, this is what he says: but cowards, unbelievers, the corrupt, murderers, the immoral, those who practice witchcraft or sorcery, idol worshippers, and all liars, their fate is in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. And that always stood out to me ever since I met Jesus, ever since I read this, is that there's this list here of people who won't inherit the kingdom, who will suffer eternal destruction, eternal death, and it starts with cowards. And I always tried to wrap my mind on why is that? And as I spent time praying, Jesus was showing me this. It's like all these things after he says, but cowards, are a description of what a true coward is. And Jesus starts here by going, but cowards, the faithless, people that are faithless. And then he goes, unbelievers, people that are untrustworthy, and the corrupt, people that are just about personal gain and they steal. They do their business in the dark, right? And they steal for personal gain. They're all about selfish ambition. Murderers, people who kill, people who intentionally harm and kill. Those who are immoral, people who basically prostitute themselves, sell themselves and just chase after lust. And then he goes on to say, those who practice witchcraft or sorcery. Is there any bigger coward than somebody who just hides in the dark and attacks from the dark? Jesus even says they shoot their arrows from the shadows. And then he goes, idol worshipers, people who worship, we were created to worship, but people don't worship him, but worship false gods, and in a sense, worship ourselves, make ourselves God of our life, right? And that's exactly what Satan wants us to do. He doesn't always just run around. Satan doesn't say, worship me. He goes, no, worship you. And then he says, and all liars. So if you see this right here, Jesus is going, you want to know what a true coward is? A true coward is defined by all these things. These are the details of a true coward. And it starts with saying, but cowards, and it ends with saying, all liars. That they run from the light. That liars are all about hiding, staying in the shadows, hiding, staying in the dark, and running and hiding from the light. And Jesus goes, that's what a true coward is. So like if this was, like an Oreo cookie, the outside parts would be cowards and all liars. And the cream in the middle here that's defining what a true coward is these details of unbelievers and the corrupt and the murderers and the immoral and those who practice witchcraft. These people of selfish ambition. And think about what this is really saying. What Jesus is saying here is he's describing the character of Satan, the father of lies, right? That they're all liars. And the father of lies, Satan, who his purpose, Jesus says in John 10, is to what? Steal, kill, and destroy. And so people who have the character of Satan are the people who are the true cowards. And if you want to be brave and you want to be courageous, then follow Jesus. In a world where almost everybody's on this wide road to destruction, displaying the character of Satan, a world filled with true cowards, you want to be brave and courageous, follow Jesus. Be one of the few on the narrow, difficult path where there's life, and life to the fullest. And so in 1 Timothy chapter 6, this is what Jesus says, and this is how he defines a man or a woman of God in verse 11. Someone who's brave and courageous. who's fighting what Jesus calls the good fight, right? Not getting involved in every fight and trying to fight every fight good, but that there's one fight that's the good fight, and it's for the true faith, and it's for Jesus, his kingdom, and the good news, the gospel. And this is what he says in 1 Timothy 6:11. But you, Timothy, are a man of God. And so you see this here where Jesus is saying, hey, if you want to be a true man of God, a true woman of God, listen to what he says next. Run from all these evil things. It's like Jesus is going, hey, there's nothing that makes you a coward for running from all these evil things. In fact, it's a command of his. He says later on here, obey this command without wavering. Run from all these evil things and pursue righteousness and a godly life. And this is so good because, I know we just had Halloween and that time of year is really big on horror movies. And what do you see in horror movies? You see people that are running from death, but they don't know where to run. They're always aimlessly running. They're just running away from something and they don't know where to run. And what happens to them is that death eventually catches up with them, right? The evil catches up with them. And you see them running to places and running to people that can't help them. And yet what Jesus says here, he doesn't just tell us to run from all these evil things, but to pursue him, to pursue righteousness and a godly life. He's going, press toward me, press into me, pursue me. And what he's talking about here, what this means when he says pursue righteousness in a godly life, he's going to pursue my character. Don't pursue Satan's character. Pursue my character. Righteousness. Do what's right in a godly life. Live like Jesus here in this world. And it's not something we can do in our own strength, yet Jesus offers himself and offers his spirit and says that he's given us everything we need to live a godly life. And so he says, pursue righteousness, pursue a godly life, pursue him, press into him, pursue living like Jesus, pursue pleasing the Spirit and living like Jesus here in this dark world where Jesus says we'll be the light of the world with his Spirit living in us. To pursue righteousness and a godly life, to pursue his character and representing him and being an example of his character. Along with, and then he starts to give this list that's the opposite of the one that he gives, where he's defining what a true coward is. And so he's defining what it looks like to fight the good fight and to be brave and courageous and fight the good fight. He says, pursue righteousness, a godly life, pursue faith. Pursue trusting him, but that word there means truth itself. Don't be a liar. Pursue truth. Live your life in complete honesty. Pursue love. And it's really important we understand what the true definition of love is, that it's not to take, but it's to give. It's the opposite of selfish ambition. It would be selfless ambition, that our ambition would be to be selfless and to give. Pursue perseverance. In a world where people say hope, a lot of people say hope is useless and pointless. Jesus is saying, be steadfast, pursue being steadfast, pursue hope. Because the true definition of hope is a confident expectation rooted in who Jesus is. To pursue your purpose. It's cheerful endurance, that we should pursue cheerful endurance because we have Jesus. And we have everything that we need. It's not just getting through something, but having joy while we endure and we go through darkness because we know the result. The result is being made more like Jesus. The result is being close to Jesus. And the result is being made more and more into his image and displaying him through a godly life more and more. And then he says, pursue gentleness. That's how basically all of this happens, right? That it means to pursue humility. That Jesus puts this great power, his Spirit in us And he says, pursue being meek. It doesn't mean that you don't have this great power from the one and only living God, the same power that raised him from the dead living in you, but it's power under control. But to pursue humility, to pursue putting others first, to pursue putting Jesus first, to really see Jesus as he is and to see him as supreme. And it always puts us in our place and it always humbles us. But we should pursue humility. And when we pursue Jesus, we're pursuing humility because we'll see him as he is, and then we'll see ourselves as we are. But, in a world, I was just teaching this to the kids the other night as our family started to go through Philippians together. We were talking about in a world where in a race, everybody wants to be first, and the gun goes off to start the race and everybody starts trying to get in front and be first. Jesus would say, be last. And he would say, if you're last, you're first when it comes to him and his kingdom. And so to think of others as better than yourself and to put yourself last, and it keeps you from worshiping yourself as an idol. And then Jesus says, fight the good fight for the true faith. That this is what it looks like to be brave and courageous. This is what it looks like to fight the good fight. This is how we fight the good fight, that we run from all these evil things and we pursue him and pursue all these things. And this is what it looks like to be brave and courageous. And it's really important that we get this and that we understand the true definition of a true coward. So as you get up today, as you start going about your day, realize that you're at war and you need to wage war. And don't be a coward. Pursue Jesus and his character and righteousness and a godly life. Run from all those evil things and be brave and courageous as you fight the good fight.